Your chair is? Okay, so you're going to call your side of the meeting to order? Or no? That's fine, okay. You do? Okay. Kenmore City Council is now in session. So if you want to call yours into session, you can. If not, all right. So first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And if there are no objections from the council side, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views that are important to you in the community. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes in deference of those who have worked hard to keep theirs at 3 minutes. Clerk, please call the first person.
There's no one signed up.
Anybody wishing to be heard?
You're looking at me like, should I fill the void?
Well, you can if you want to. Okay, hearing nobody, citizen comments are closed. Next item then, North Shore School District updates. Yeah, up. There you go.
Up? Okay, there I am. All right, well, thank you. We just so appreciate the relationship we have with the city of Kenmore and how supportive you are and interested you are in all the things going on in our school district. And we're just so impressed by how many positive things are happening in the city of Kenmore as well. So we're excited to hear what's new in your world as well. So you had some specific requests of things you were interested in learning a little bit more about. So I'll kind of follow along the written presentation that we have here. I just want to introduce a couple of folks and extend my apologies to the Kenmore staff. We did not communicate very well on our end who would be here representing us. So I'll kind of lead the presentation, but then here jumping in and helping me out will be Ryan Fujiwara. He's our Executive Director of Support Services, and Karen Musiker, who is our Director of Capital Projects, because we'll be talking about some of our capital projects works that we have going on. So first we'll talk just a little bit about our boundary changes. So on January 26th, after well over 2 years of processing, the North Shore School District Board of Directors approved the final boundary adjustment plan that will be implemented in 2017-18. And so this plan really has three objectives. So one, it creates the service area and the feeder pattern for North Creek High School, our new high school that we'll chat about in a little bit. Two, it balances enrollment better across our district and across our service feeder patterns. And then three, it also coincides with our reconfiguring of our grade levels that will occur in 2017-18 as well. So when we open North Creek, our 9th graders will move up into high school, and our high schools will become four-year high schools. Our 6th graders will move up into elementary schools and will become 6th through 8th grade middle schools. So it's a very large plan. It moves around about 3,500 students. Now, about 1,300 of them are getting a brand new high school in that first year, so they're getting a pretty good deal out of it. But other than that, it touches each of our 29 service areas in some way or another, to some degree or another. So it's a very large, involved plan. We had 2 people who came to the meeting on the 26th to offer public comment. One of them had some very legitimate concerns about transitions and the number of schools that their child may be in over multiple years. And the other one, their essential message was, please just approve a plan so we have some certainty and we can move on. So I take it as a little bit of a victory that after 2 years of processing and something of that magnitude, probably the most disruptive thing a school district will do ever is adjusting boundaries, that we went through that in the final at the final turn relatively unscathed. So you can see on page, I think these are numbered not, but the first map page, I guess would be the 3rd page in. This is just a sort of a very global conceptual map. The dark lines are the current feeder patterns of our 3 existing high schools, Bothell, Inglemoor, and Woodinville. And then the shaded areas, the pink, the blue, the orange, and the green represent the colors, represent the service areas of our new high school. So you can just sort of get a very general overview of how the district will be divided. That pink area in the north end of the district will be the service area for North Creek High School. You can see that Kenmore's high school picks up a little area there down towards the slough, picks up a little bit of area between Kenmore and I believe the current West Hill service area. And then the biggest difference for the Inglemore service area is that large blue area right above the red line there and slightly below the red line to the far left of the page. That's the current Lockwood Elementary service area. So Lockwood currently is an elementary that feeds up into Inglemore High School. Beginning in 2017-18, Lockwood will instead feed to Bothell High School. And I was telling Stacy, so back in the early 90s, we actually lived in the Lockwood service area, and our older daughter went to Lockwood in kindergarten through second grade before we moved. And at that time, although we were a long ways away from high school, knowing that she was scheduled to go to Inglemore from Lockwood didn't make a whole lot of sense to us at the time, because Bothell was literally just up the hill and sort of down the street. So I think most people, I mean, obviously change is difficult, but I think most people in the Lockwood service area are fairly positive about this change, because logistically it makes a bit more sense for them to be at Bothell. The next page is just a bit more of a granular map where you can see the changes in the Inglemore High School service area. So again, picking up the yellow piece in the middle of the page is some property, some service area that was on the, I suppose it would be the south side of the slough, that will now incorporate into the Inglemore service area all the way down to the slough. And then a little bit, again, from what must have been Kenmore Elementary, that will move off to West Hill. And then again, the Lockwood service area, the blue part at the top there, that will become part of the Bothell feeder pattern.
So the outline here in black, this green that's over it, that's new.
New into Inglemore service area.
Where is there any loss to Inglemore service area?
The main loss would be Lockwood.
Okay, but I'm not. This
Yep,
whole, that whole area up there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. And then the next page reflects the junior highs. So Kenmore Junior High its service area is going to change. So if you can look sort of below the yellow below the green there, that would be the Arrowhead service area. So Arrowhead is moving from feeding to Kenmore Junior High to Inglemore. They will now feed to North Shore Junior High back to Inglemore. So still in the Inglemore service pattern, but a different junior high. And then you can see that some of the current Kenmore service area, the blue up there just to the right of the word Kenmore, that is moving over to the Canyon Park service area. And the reason for that is that the Kenmore service area is now going to extend much farther north, because part of our challenge is trying to shift over enrollment in the north end of the district to the south, where we have more schools to accommodate it. The next page is even busier. Yeah, Alan.
Before you move on this page that I think is the middle school,
Yep.
junior high to middle school
Yep.
changes. There's the boundary of the current with dark lines, and then the green shaded of Kenmore. There's a section up here that goes off the page.
Yep.
Now that goes up into Briar and.
That is going to go all the way up into the very north end of our district. So Kenmore Junior High's feeder pattern will be long and narrow. So there will be students coming from Frank Love and Crystal Springs Elementary School all the way down to Kenmore.
What was the logic in doing that and removing this corner?
I'll show you a little bit of the logic of that when we get a little farther along. But aside from just trying to balance enrollment, so we had to do some find ways to move enrollment from the north to the south. That's one of the rationale. And then we were also, largely as a result of our meeting with you last spring, went back and did a fundamental change in the plan where the plan keeps all elementary cohorts intact from elementary to high school. And so that was another reason for the change. So we'll get to that in just a minute. The next page is the elementary school service areas. So again, you can see minor changes, particularly around Kenmore Elementary, between Kenmore and Shelton View, Kenmore and West Hill, Morelands and Arrowhead. So
So that little finger of green then that goes up for Kenmore is actually on the page before this little bit.
correct.
Okay.
Right.
I see.
Right. And you can see that Lockwood, nothing changed in Lockwood's service area. It's one of it might be the only service area of our 29 service areas that had no geographic change, but its change was moving from Inglemore to Bothell High School. So kind of the second part of Alan's question is really the next page. So right now we have a pretty clean feeder pattern at the secondary level. So we have 6 junior high schools and we have 3 high schools. So each high school is fed evenly and completely by 2 junior high schools. Now with 4 high schools, 6 middle schools, 20 elementary schools, we had to decide where we would have the breaks because the math and the numbers just don't feed that cleanly anymore. So when we met with you last year, we had a bit of we had more schools that were split up, both at the elementary level and at the middle school level, where students would go off in different directions. You spoke very, very, very clearly and passionately about the importance of keeping Kenmore cohorts together. And so that caused us to go back and take another look at the plan. So the final plan is actually much cleaner than the first draft of the plan that was shared with you last year. So the way to read this is every one of the large boxes is a high school feeder pattern. And then you have the small boxes down below. So in the case of Inglemore High School, all the students from Woodmore, Morelands, and Arrowhead go to North Shore Junior High and then go to Inglemore High. All the students from Kenmore Elementary will go to Kenmore Middle School and then will also go to Inglemore High. If you look at Bothell, Lockwood, Frank Love will go to Kenmore and then they'll go back to Bothell. But that entire elementary cohort of Lockwood and Frank Love go back intact to Bothell High School. And similarly, West Hill, Shelton View, Maywood Hills will all go to Canyon Park and then move on to Bothell. So you can see that's kind of the way that you read it. And our new high school, North Creek High School, actually gets fed by portions of 3 middle schools. So Canyon Creek, Fernwood, and about 2/3 of Crystal Springs will all go to Skyview and then on to North Creek. About 1/3 of Crystal Springs will go to Canyon Park for middle school, but then will come back and rejoin their elementary cohort in high school at North Creek. Kokanee Elementary School, they will all go to Leota, and then they will all go to North Creek. And then you can see same at the Woodinville feeder pattern, Woodin, Wellington, about half of Hollywood Hill go to Leota, and then go back intact to Woodinville High School. Sunrise, Eastridge, Cottage Lake, Bear Creek, and about half of Hollywood Hill go to Timbercrest, and then all go back to Woodinville. So this might still look really busy and messy, but this is much, much cleaner than what the original plan involved. And about the best we could do, and as I say, what we were able to achieve was keeping all of the elementary cohorts intact to their respective high schools. And the break we had to make was at the middle school level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comment. I think this is a lot better than I sort of remember the last one being. And if we had some input in helping your decision making, I'm happy for that.
You really did. your input, so from the first draft to the second draft, we made about 15 to 20 fairly significant changes, and many of them were around the input that you provided us, but it also, the whole idea of cohort continuity really took resonance with us, and so Ryan and his team that did most of the work around the plan were really able to go back and apply that concept. So North Creek, we'll move on from boundaries. So just a little bit update on North Creek. That's our new high school that we're building, full comprehensive 1,600 plus student high school to serve grades 9 through 12. It is actively under construction. It is taking shape daily. It is on time, actually ahead of schedule, on budget. The favorable weather window we got last year really accelerated construction, was a really great opportunity for us. It is built around 21st century ideas of collaboration and creativity, communication. There are very intentional design elements built into the school to foster that. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and green elements built into the school as well. And this all came out of a very involved visioning process that we undertook before we began active design. And normally you might just get sort of the educators together to help the architects sort of understand what you're trying to achieve with the building and design it. And we actually had the educators for sure, but we had higher ed folks there, we had community representation, and we had lots of folks from private business. So Dean Allen, CEO of McKinstry, sat on our visioning team, folks from the Institute for Systems Biology. So we really collected and gathered a much more diverse group of folks to help us with conceptualizing how you might design a school, create the physical space around what you wanted to achieve instructionally. And I think the school is going to be a really, really wonderful example of that. So rather than me talking and just staring at one piece of paper, we have a short video. We've done several of these. Our technology department has a drone that they fly around and take some video as well as some interior video. So we thought you might like to see what the school's looking like. So lots of open space, and everything you see there, all the cabinets are all writable, so you can write on them with dry erase markers. All the wood that you see there is all reclaimed wood from the trees that were taken down on the site.
So you can't use Sharpies?
You can't use Sharpies, no, they've got to be the dry erase. But so these walls are all foldable out into the open spaces, so the hallways are very wide and have intentional learning spaces. So if you have a class in there, your class can be out there. You can be collaborating with classes across the hall in a similar fashion. These are called nano walls. This is really narrated much better than I'm doing, but so just, and then even in classrooms that don't have the foldable walls, everything is very open. So we're in the process right now of recruiting staff who want to teach at North Creek, and they need to understand what the school is, because if you're a teacher and you want
STEM classrooms.
Ah, there we go.
The art rooms have an open design and large flexible space. They have plenty of natural lighting as well as ample cabinets for storage and supplies. Down the hall a few doors is a STEM classroom. These classrooms are also large and have plenty of storage and space. A shared computer lab connects these two spaces. The layout of these spaces allows for easy collaboration between art and STEM classes. Students in a STEM class could be creating objects designed by students in an art class. Work on the main gym also continues. The brackets for the basketball hoops are being installed. Visible on the wall are areas where displays will be mounted to be used for sporting events and other school activities such as assemblies. Across the hallway from the gym is the locker room. The lockers will be short lockers, which will give the staff the ability to easily see across the entire locker room. North Creek High School will be an amazing new school that will foster a collaborative and innovative approach to educating our students.
So that was as of about, within the last week to 10 days, that video was shot. So you're getting a very firsthand view of sort of the state of construction. When you look at the page that has the view of the school on it, you can see that some of the fields are already in. Mm-hmm. Soccer field, see the softball field's already in. Just above the two main academic buildings there's a wetlands area that'll have a promenade, a walk that will go all the way through it, so it's intended to be an active part of the learning environment of the school. The building with the star on it, that's what we're calling Building 3, so that's the big mega building. That houses the commons, the gym, the art rooms, the performing arts center. That's just a massive, massive building.
What's that big square space by the baseball field?
The big square space by the baseball field, that is, one's a softball field and one will be a baseball field. So I think that big square space just doesn't have the turf down yet, but that's going to be the baseball field.
That's going to be baseball.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe it does have the turf down. It's not down yet? No.
What you see there is actually grass growing in the softball outfield and the softball.
And then an interesting energy efficiency feature of the school is to the left of the building with the star, that area is what will be the student parking lot. Underneath the student parking lot there are about 125, 130 geothermal wells that are at a depth of about 330 to 350 feet. And so part of the energy efficiency of the building is that water is pumped down into the wells, the natural heating of the ground heats the water up that then come back up through the systems and help heat the building. So it'd be a source of heat in the wintertime and potentially a source of cooling, although not full-on air conditioning in the summertime. And it's a pretty elaborate system, and it's every time I go there, I have to go into the room to see all the mechanics of how all this works because it's so fascinating to me. So the road down on the bottom of the page there that runs along the full bottom, that's 35th Avenue, so you can kind of orient yourself a little bit. The road that goes to the right side of the school, that's a brand new road, 192nd, that we have created in conjunction with some of the residential developers to the far right. And then that road goes up and turns down another road, 39th, that is also another road that we've created. And then that road ends right at Fernwood Elementary School that is adjacent to the North Creek property. And as you can see from the map, lots of residential houses directly surrounding the school. If you took the view out even farther, you'd see even more residential houses. And if you look up in the top left corner of the page, you see cleared earth spots where there's going to be even more houses that are going to be built. So definitely a continued growing area of our district. Any other questions on North Creek? Yeah.
Did you pursue any kind of LEED certification for the environmental?
We haven't.
Okay.
I don't think we probably wouldn't qualify, I don't believe. Some of the elements you'd probably have to get LEED certification got value engineered out of the project because the payback times on them were going to be too long. You probably had some of those same experiences building this building as well.
We did.
Yeah. So all-day kindergarten was another topic that you've been asked about. So one other thing I should have said with respect to purpose behind the boundary adjustments for 2017-18 was also to create capacity for all of our elementary schools to offer full-day kindergarten. Right now, the state standard, what the state funds, is half-day kindergarten, and we do offer full-day kindergarten across the district, but that other half is paid for with parent tuition. So beginning in 2017-18, the state has had a commitment for a number of years that beginning in that year, they would fund full-day kindergarten for all students. So part of our boundary work and part of our need to better balance enrollment across the district was to create the classroom space to have full-day kindergarten. If you have half-day kindergarten, you can serve twice the number of students in one classroom as if you have full-day kindergarten. Well, what the state did is they moved up optional funding of full-day kindergarten a year to 2016-17. In theory, a good thing, but it doesn't work very well with the timeline we've been operating under, and we're just not in a position to implement our boundary plan any sooner because we have to have a completed high school, and it's a very elaborate and integrated plan. So we will be maximizing where we can offer full-day kindergarten next year. So any place that we have space, we will be providing it. There will be no more parent tuition for anybody, any families in North Shore, effective next year. But unfortunately, at some of our schools where we do not have sufficient space for full-day kindergarten, we're going to have to continue with a combination of half-day and full-day kindergarten programs for at least one more year. And in condition of accepting state funding for full-day kindergarten, if you have a school where you can't offer full-day kindergarten to all the students, the state requires that we prioritize students from low-income families or students who would otherwise benefit from a full-day kindergarten program, meaning perhaps they have language barriers, or perhaps they have disabilities, or perhaps they didn't have the benefit of a rigorous and rich preschool program. So if you look at the next page, and I think we're back to having numbers on them, page 11 now, we've highlighted the elementary schools in the Inglemore feeder pattern. And so what you see is that two of those schools, Kenmore and Arrowhead, will be able to offer full-day kindergarten to all students next year. Lockwood, Morelands, and Shelton View will still have a combination of full and half-day kindergarten classes. So next year we anticipate having in total across the district 42 classrooms of full-day kindergarten and 19 classrooms or 38 class sections of half-day kindergarten in the district. And then again in 17-18 school year, no more half-day kindergarten. 100% of our students will have the opportunity for full-day kindergarten. This has been a huge challenge for us to figure out how in this one gap year next year before our boundary adjustment plan is in place to maximize full-day kindergarten. Was very we had a number of options, a number of plans that were developed that the board considered and have landed on this plan for next year. So it's far from perfect for sure. It does allow 9 of our 20 elementary schools to have full-day kindergarten for all students, but unfortunately 11 of them won't for one more year. So, questions about that? So class size mandates and class size reductions. So the state has also been increasing funding for smaller class sizes. So next year, the state intends to fund kindergarten class sizes of 19 students per one teacher, first grade of 21 per one teacher, and second and third grades of 22 per one teacher. And their eventual plan over time is to get to 17. So smaller class sizes are great, and smaller class sizes mean you need to have more classrooms. So we're working through that issue right now, trying to anticipate how quickly the state might get down to the 17-to-1. And then if they get there, how much flexibility we have in meeting those class size ratios. Meaning, will the state require that we have hard and fast class size averages of 17 students, or could you look at a more creative distribution of teachers? Perhaps there's 4 first grade classrooms and maybe there's 5 first grade teachers, and one of the teachers doesn't necessarily have a class of students but works with students in some other capacity, whether providing remediation or enrichment or reading support, or perhaps teaches science or those kinds of things. So we'll be awaiting the rules on all of those, and how those rules play themselves out will largely determine what our classroom space needs are going to be in the future. It's also important to note that the way the state funds us, we get, a number of teachers based on our enrollment, but those teachers aren't just classroom teachers. They're also the same allocation that we use to create music teachers, PE specialists, librarians. So it kind of all goes into one pot. So sometimes legislators walk around in schools and they say, well, I haven't seen a classroom yet that has only 21 students in it. Well, some of that is simply because that same allocation based on those 21 students per classroom is also funding and supporting teachers that aren't necessarily associated with a specific group, a specific classroom group. So this is all still under discussion at the legislature, and they have other legislation to approve in the coming years to implement that, so we'll see how that all works out. And page 13, just talking about some of our upcoming bond and levy renewals. We have traditionally been on a 4-year bond and levy cycle in our district, where we have run 3 measures every 4 years. So our operations levy that funds our day-to-day business of educating kids, our technology levy that funds our classroom and district technology needs, and then a bond. And that has been a very successful formula for the district to run all 3 measures together for well before my time in the district. And one of the advantage of that is, I believe, for the North Shore community, they've gotten used to seeing everything at once. So tell us what the total tax burden is going to be that you're asking the community to support, and tell it all once. Don't sort of piecemeal run one measure here and then run another measure there, and then it's hard to sort of keep track of what this is looking like in total. The other benefit that it's had, particularly on the bond side, is you may see some of the neighboring districts or some of the districts in the region that are trying to run what I call mega bonds, $300, $400, $500 million bond measures that are, can be sort of eye-popping numbers for communities to wrap their heads around. Because we've been able to pass a bond every 4 years, ours have been generally much smaller than some of the bonds that you're seeing, and they've enabled us to sustain a more ongoing capital projects program, both to build new schools to accommodate enrollment growth, as well as to renovate our schools to keep them current, keep them in good shape, put additions on them, new roofs, new windows, whatever the needs may be. So we're working through that plan right now. One of the things that we do know and our board has approved is that the 2018 bond will include funding for another North End school. They approved that last June. So we have our enrollment demographics task force is working right now to determine what type of school that will be. They hope to bring that recommendation forward to our board by April of this year, and then that will be sort of the centerpiece of the 2018 bond. So then we'll have to go through the process of determining what our other needs are district-wide and what we think we can partner with that new school and what we think we may have to wait until a future bond measure to include. So we'll be doing that work May through January, and then we'll try and land on what we think the elements of the bond will be and start our communication. And then by about fall of 2017, we have to pass the resolutions to put the bond measures on the ballot, and then anticipate that our next election will be in February of 2018. And should you or any of the folks that you associate with have interest in participating in this, we have sort of two task force opportunities for folks that will be soliciting community members to participate in. One is what we call our Capital Bond Planning Task Force. So this is the group that looks at all of our needs district-wide for our facilities, and then goes through the work of paring those down to what we will actually include in our bond measure. And as you might imagine, the first run of needs looks very large, and then we have to start making, choices to get down to what our actual critical needs are and what we think is an appropriate bond measure to present to the community. And then the second will be our technology levy planning task force. So they'll do the same thing with respect to our technology levy. So looking out the next 4 years, what do we see as our technology needs? What do we see as emerging trends in technology? And then how do we quantify that into dollars in a levy measure that we would want to present to our voters? So if you have any interest or expertise or know anybody who does in any of those areas, we'll be seeking those people in the near future. And as part of that work, where it begins, and Karen and her department sort of lead this, every 4 years we do a comprehensive analysis of all of our buildings and all of their major systems. So roof, heating, electrical, plumbing, all the major components that make up a functional school. And we grade and we rate all of those, and that's where we begin the process of identifying our needs. So it's not who screams the loudest. It's not, who we think we need or want to make happy. It is a very objective process that really looks at how do we sustain the quality and provide the necessary maintenance and upkeep on our buildings over time. I'm really proud of the work that our departments do to make that happen. And we have for the most part, in general, looking at having 32 schools in the district, they're really in very, very good shape.
Yeah. So we have a little over 3 million square feet that we're trying to manage, including any additional portables or new schools that we'll add online over the next 4 or 8 years.
So as far as kind of long-term enrollment or just kind of a general look, page 14 is an interesting page, so I'll kind of just read from top to bottom. So when you look at, starting in 2006, the bonds we've passed, 123 million in 2006, 149 million in 2010, and 177 million in 2014. So again, that illustrates that sort of our slow and steady approach to our bonds and our capital projects has to this point put us in a position where we can avoid having to go out for $200, $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 million bonds that some of our neighboring districts have had to ask for. So it's just a different approach, a different philosophy. I think it works better for the community, and I'm pleased that the community has responded to that thus far. When you look at property acquisitions, so the Maltby site, a piece of property up off Maltby Road in the north end of the district, we bought that in 2010. That is the site at which whatever school we decide to incorporate into our 2018 bond will be sited at. The North Creek High School site we bought in 2012, and that's where we're actively under construction of North Creek High School. And then earlier in the fall, we purchased the Wellington Hills Golf Course from Snohomish County. It's about 104 acres up the road from Costco there, where the Snohomish County was intending to build a regional park complex, and they actually purchased instead, simultaneous with our purchase of that property, they purchased a piece of property called the Carousel Horse Ranch, which is north of Brightwater off Highway 9. We were looking at that as a future school site ourselves, got into discussions with the county. Turns out the Wellington site is actually a much better piece of property for us. Long term, we think we can get at least 2, potentially 3 schools there, but at least 2. And we're working through some opposition from the neighbors up there who didn't like the idea of a regional county park and don't much like the idea of schools there either, as well as the city of Woodinville. Looking at completed construction, again, we anticipate opening North Creek High School in 2017, and then we'll be on a tight timeline, but if we're successful with our 2018 bond, it would be our goal to open a new school on the Maltby site in 2020. We know that the north end of the district is going to continue to grow, so North Creek and our opening North Creek and implementing our boundary plan isn't going to be sufficient over time to address our space needs in that part of the district. And then looking at boundary changes, we had our boundary change in 2007. That boundary change was supposed to last about 5 years. We eked a little bit more time out of it because of the downturn in the housing market, but by the time we make our next boundary change in 2017, we will be long past due, needing to provide relief to overcrowded schools in the north part of the district, as well as a school like Morelands that is significantly larger than it should be. And then we anticipate our next boundary adjustment would be in 2020, and that would be a much smaller boundary adjustment, but that would coincide with the opening of a new school on the Maltby site. And then down below you can just see some enrollment projections. It's a little busy to read, but the top bar, the sort of orange shaded bar, is our projected high school enrollment. The middle bar is our projected middle school enrollment, and the blue bar at the bottom is our projected elementary enrollment. So what I would point out here is if you look at our projected enrollment in 2011 at elementary, 11,892. When we implement our 2017 plan and our sixth graders move up into middle schools, our elementary enrollment drops by about 1,500 students. So that's how we are providing relief to overcrowded elementaries, is through grade reconfiguration. So it's a pretty elaborate plan. And then you can see projections for where we see enrollment going over time. So we definitely, unless there should be another downturn in the housing market or other events that are unanticipated, we definitely see ourselves continuing to grow as a district into the future. So we have not opened a new school since 1997 in the district. Timbercrest Junior High was the last school we opened, until North Creek will open in 2017, so that's 20 years. But if you look at the 30 years prior to that, we were opening up a new school about every 18 months. So we look like heading into the future, we're going back to a period of growth more like the history of the district than the last 20 years have been.
So, given the growth, given the schools that you're planning to open, boundary changes, expecting to go through this again now in 19?
Yes, but we think it'll be just more, the boundary changes we're doing now are impacting all 29 service areas in the district to some degree or another. The boundary change in 2020 will be related to whatever school we build in the north end of the district, so it will likely impact a much smaller number of schools, potentially 4 to 5 to a half a dozen.
And then you were talking about the mega bonds. I know Lake Washington's getting ready to go out for a bond measure. Any idea what they're?
I think theirs is about 390 million, something like that. They'd started at their first bond they ran last year was 750 million, and then they came back with a 400 and some million dollar bond, and now I think they're just under 400, about
so
390.
Those bonds obviously didn't make it.
No, they did not. That's a pretty, that's a, you know, the numbers are, I don't question their need. They certainly have even larger, as an annual percentage, greater enrollment growth than we do. But those are really big numbers to try and convince the community to support.
Yeah, the cost per year I think would be pretty steep for a homeowner.
You would have to think so, yeah, Alan.
I might have missed it, but if the state legislature responds to the McCleary decision and increases basic funding for basic education, are you taking that into consideration in your plans here, or how would it affect our plans in this district?
Nigel, you want to?
No.
Okay.
I was signaling to the mayor.
Yeah. Again, depending on, particularly around class size reduction, depending on the rules they apply, it could take the surplus of classrooms we hope to achieve with our boundary reduction and eliminate it very quickly. So we're hoping that the rules will be a bit more flexible so that we can use teaching staff perhaps in more flexible ways and not necessarily have to have individualized classrooms of 17 children per one teacher. If we had to do that, we would be short
Roughly about 50 classrooms.
yeah, about 2 schools worth.
2 schools.
Yeah.
But are they going to limit class sizes and not fund it?
Well, that's the big question.
Yeah.
So, cynically for the legislature, if they can say they fund class size reduction and they can hold that you have to hit a firm ratio. And then if you only can get the money if you receive the ratio. Well, our district, like a lot of other districts, would probably have to turn that money back. And so it's kind of the best place if you're a politician to be. You can say you did something and then you don't necessarily have to take responsibility for the fact that you didn't really have to pay for it because it wasn't practical for people to be able to implement that. Now that's a more cynical view, but we're talking with our legislators, and we've got great legislators in our area who really understand the issues. I mean, we pick up folks from the 46th and North Seattle, and they're having similar types of growth issues as well. So we're hoping we'll get a bit more reasonable and flexible implementation from the state. Where the McCleary monies and the McCleary decision could impact us is that, the basis of the McCleary ruling is that school districts are unconstitutionally over-reliant on their local levy dollars to fund their basic day-to-day operations that are the state's responsibilities. So should the state step forward and fully fund those basic education responsibilities, we would expect that what we would need to collect and can collect in our local levies should decline.
Nigel?
I was a little perplexed when I saw that the school district was purchasing this multi location outside of the UGA. Can you just walk me through a little bit of what the thought process was of buying property outside the UGA?
Sure.
Oh, was that
Wellington or?
Yes, sorry, Wellington.
So King County, so we are 2/3 in King County and 1/3 in Snohomish County in our district. King County currently has a hard and firm prohibition against building schools outside of the urban growth area. So one of the drivers for us as we've been shopping for property was to look outside of King County. Snohomish County does not have a hard and fast prohibition. They discourage siting of secondary schools outside of the UGA, but they don't strictly prohibit it. So when we were looking and shopping for property, looking at where we have enrollment growth, where we're expecting enrollment growth, and where there is available property of sufficient size, it really blocked us into about a 2-by-4 mile window or area in that kind of east part of our district in Snohomish County. And so that's where the Wellington site became very attractive for us, meeting sort of all of those criteria. Yeah.
I think part of the challenge also is if we take a look back at the 3rd page and you look at the map, I think one of the challenges that we have is the urban growth line sort of cuts our district right in half.
Right.
And what we know during this large construction market is that for a district to compete with developers, we're starting to get into a bidding war. And I think, as a public agency, we have some restrictions around what we can pay for around an appraised value of property. And so we're talking to some of our neighbors right now who are looking at purchasing property in the UGA, not out of the UGA. And right now they're paying something like 10 to 1 on the dollar. So for every acre that we may pay $100,000 on, they may be paying $1 million on. So I think one of the things that we started looking at is sort of anticipated growth. If the urban growth line continues to move, where do we forecast or see this growth continuing to move? And we know that at some point the urban growth will have to continue to move east. I think the challenge that we have is, if you look at our district, is in Snohomish County, as Larry said, we're about 2 miles from the end of our boundary. And typically the requirements is you have to purchase property inside your district. And trying to find property that's 20, 40, 60 acres is very scarce, I think, in the areas that we're searching for.
One of the first places we started looking was to see if we could expand the Maltby site that we had purchased in 2010. So could we pick up adjacent properties near it, and it's about a 31-acre site, and could we make it larger to perhaps accommodate more schools in that area? And it was very difficult. Some of the adjacent homeowners weren't particularly interested in selling, and so as a public agency, when you don't have willing sellers, your alternative is to go to eminent domain and essentially take property, which isn't something the district found attractive to do or wouldn't desire to do. So again, trying to find single pieces of property that you can either assemble or you can pick up from in one transaction, your options are pretty limited. And I think our folks did an excellent job scouring every possible alternative. And we certainly understand the concerns of the neighbors up in Wellington about trying to preserve the more rural quality of their neighborhood up the hill from Costco there. And the earliest we would ever foresee building anything on the Wellington side is the early 2020s, probably, part of our 2022 bond at the earliest. And lots will change between now and then, and we certainly expect that even when we were building North Creek High School, the neighborhood, while excited that they were going to get some enrollment relief and in some respects excited about a new school, there's still that NIMBY complex of having a school that close to you and all that entails. And I think we've demonstrated an ability to be good neighbors and to work cooperatively with the neighborhood to address their concerns as we've built North Creek and as we look towards opening it, and we would expect to do the same up in the Wellington side as well when we get to that place.
Thanks. Hey, Larry, I had a couple of questions.
Yep.
You just actually answered one of them from Nigel that I was curious about. The other one was on the enrollment for the elementary. After the adjustment in 2017, I noticed that the blue is pretty much static all the way for the next 10 years out, but with all the growth. I'm just wondering, is there something I'm missing with the new construction? I figure I'm not reading something right.
Sure. So a couple things that we've been doing is we've been working with a demographer. So there's two sort of key components we look at. One is birth rates. Currently our birth rates are up, but at some point the development up in our north end, there's the permit shrinks. So what we anticipate today is we have about a 3-year surplus of permits, maybe about 3,000 permits available, and then after that the development shrinks very quickly. So we're anticipating that we'll still see some birth cohorts bringing more kids in, but we also think that the construction market, at least in the north end of our district, will continue to dry down or shrink. What we're starting to see, I think that's going to be different, and I think this is going to be a different scenario for the district, is we're starting to see what we call construction infill, where you have older homes on larger property that used to be a single-family home that's now being developed into 3, 4, 5, or 6 homes. Those are the changes that we're starting to see, but the mega 300 to 600 home development, those permits are no longer in the pipeline.
So another way to look at it would be that we anticipate at some point, as Ryan said, as the development sort of winds its way out, that will stabilize from the standpoint of the number of new kindergartners that enter the system every year, but we'll have this larger cohort of grade levels that started several years ago that will be working their way through the system. So you got to kind of think of the basketball going through the snake.
Yeah.
So if that remains relatively static with the new growth coming in, then I'm curious how that translates into the new need for new construction going forward.
Sure. So the one thing that we can anticipate, and this is the thing that I think we're trying to stay in touch with our local jurisdictions, 2025 is the next decision point for the counties to change their urban growth boundaries. And so what we're trying to do is we're really trying to anticipate what the counties are going to start looking at. Now, as Larry shared, I think in King County, I think they're holding firm on moving the urban growth. But in Snohomish County, they're pretty flexible. At least what we've seen over the last 10, 20 years is that they're willing to move their urban boundary. And what we know is that at some point, as that continues to move out, we'll continue to need some space up in that northeast portion of our district. We're sort of behind the 8 ball, and I think that's the one thing, the challenge that we're trying to determine of what to build at Maltby, is that the growth happened much faster and quicker than we could develop. And so we're sort of trying to play catch up, but know that we have this basketball coming through the pipeline, as well as what we're starting to see, as I shared, the cohorts at the kindergarten level are much bigger. We're anticipating somewhere between 300 and 400 additional elementary kids coming through the pipeline than what's graduating each year.
Okay, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I was just talking with a property owner who owns 5 acres up on 45th Avenue Southeast, and he was, this just happened to be last week, but I didn't even relate it to the school district at the time. It was work related, but he said he'd just talked to an official at Snohomish County who said he didn't anticipate that urban growth line would be changing even before 2050. He says they don't see any change near term. Now, obviously, things change and affordability is a major issue for, so who knows where that goes. But I am curious to know how this process works.
Yeah. And a lot of that will depend on the orientation of the county council when the time comes for urban growth line to be reviewed. But as Ryan said, they are getting close to sort of build out up to the current line in the north part of the district. And so what we anticipate more of is, as you said, the smaller developments where you'll see larger tracts of land with an older home on it that'll get redeveloped into a smaller, community of homes. So,
okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we're sort of waiting for is the legislative decision around K-3 class size. Yeah. I think that's going to be the big unknown that we're sort of anticipating for. We know something's going to happen. It's what's that something going to happen. And I think the challenge that we always have from a facility perspective is reading the crystal ball and trying to stay ahead of the decisions. And typically, decisions change, similar to like the full day K.
And also, it's important to realize too, the elementary schools that feed into North Creek High School up in the area near the Maltby property, even with grade reconfiguration, are still very dependent on portables. So add one more thing, like the move of the urban growth boundary, add smaller class size ratios, and that's a tipping point that we really need to plan for.
Yeah, I will say, and I don't want to oversell what our boundary adjustment plan and grade reconfiguration 2017 is going to achieve. There will still be a handful of schools in the north end of the district in particular that will be much larger than ideally they should be. They'll be smaller than they are now. They will get relief. But relief might look like going from 900 students to perhaps 700 students. It won't be going from 900 students to 500 or 450 students. So there's still going to be capacity strains that we're going to feel in that part of the district. Improvement for sure, but not ideal.
I think a good example, if you just look at that page that we are on, if you just look at the number of elementary portables we've added in the last 4 years, I think we've added over 40 new elementary portables, which is typically about 3.5 elementary schools.
So then just the last page, we were asked to just speak a little bit about school impact fees, and I'll just give the general overview, and then if any more specific questions, I'll defer to Ryan and Karen. But this is a topic that apparently has a lot of interest in folks out in the community, sort of the idea that development should pay for development. Our ability to collect impact fees, education school impact fees, comes out of the same Growth Management Act. It comes out of our capital facilities plan that we update on a regular basis. In the current rules of the plan, in the big picture, require us to look at all of our capacity district-wide to determine our eligibility for impact fees. So from the standpoint of the plan, it's not terribly concerned with whether we have a large concentration of population in one part of our district that isn't really accessible to capacity we may have in another part of our district. It just looks and says, what is your capacity across your entire district? So when we apply those formulas and when we apply those rules to our current enrollment, even with the significant enrollment growth and the overcrowding we have in some parts of our district, that gets canceled out by the excess capacity we have primarily in the east side of our district. So we're not able to collect those fees. We do update our capital facilities plan on an annual basis so that in the event we do qualify for those fees, we can begin collecting them. Even if we do begin collecting them, we could only collect them on newly permitted property. So you can't go back in time and seek impact fees for development that's already been permitted or already been completed. So we continue to monitor that. I think it's a confusing thing for some folks to recognize when they do see such overcrowding and such congestion in some parts of our district. We certainly understand that. If you look at the next page, 16, this is just a spreadsheet from our capital facilities plan. So you can see the top is our calculated surplus capacity at the elementary level. So coming into 16-17, estimated at about 758 students, or calculated at about 758 students. Again, most of that excess capacity is being driven by schools that aren't at capacity in the east side of the district. And then you can see what happens in 17-18 when we reconfigure grade levels. All of a sudden that capacity jumps up. So we've got to get that to show a negative in order to generate impact fees.
So one of the exercises that we went through in the boundary change was to what would happen if we fed up all of our space, move the kids in the north end of our district and just start shifting everybody southeast where we had a lot of capacity. I think what the subcommittee and the larger task force was concerned about is you started driving kids past multiple schools. And so they were concerned about busing, that we would be a district that would be busing kids from one part of our district to the other part of the district where we had excess capacity. And I think one of the things that it required us to do is instead of moving 3,500 kids, we'd be moving 8,000 kids. And I think the concern from the task force or the community task force was that what we don't want to do is kids who are walking to their current school having to be on the bus for an hour to get out to schools to fill up the capacity that we had in that area. And that's the challenge that we have when you draw the urban growth line straight down the middle of our district.
Yeah.
Right? So we went through that exercise. We looked at it. I don't think it was palatable for the task force to say, yeah, let's check that one. And but they wanted to really see what the exercise would do for the number of kids that would be moved and bused to respective parts of the districts.
So it sounds a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but one of the drivers of the folks who did the boundary work is they wanted to make sure that the school was actually in the service area that it would be serving. So that's sort of what Ryan was saying. You may have to draw a service area for a school where the school was actually outside of that service area to truly utilize more equitably all of our capacity, shoving it as far east as possible. And that just didn't seem like a practical solution. So that's why I say some of the schools, they'll get relief, but they won't necessarily all get equitably right-sized across 20 elementaries and 6 middle schools. Because you still have geography and density differences across the district that we have to contend with.
Yeah. I think the other thing that you should be aware of is we know impact fees is a complicated formula. So we typically work with our legal counsel each year. And part of our work with legal counsel is ensuring that we're meeting the requirements around the urban growth. we're meeting the various jurisdictional requirements. So not only for us, but Kenmore, but we have 3 or 4 other local cities as well as 2 counties. And that we're ensuring that in our capital facility plan, when we're ready or if we're eligible, that we can start the process right away. So,
the last couple of years, there has been legislation introduced in Olympia that would allow a district to divide itself into regions or into different areas and then do the impact fee calculation specific to that area, not necessarily to the entire district. And that would potentially be helpful, potentially would drive development impact fees in the high impact, high growth areas of our district. As you might imagine, the Master Builders Association tends to lobby strongly in opposition to that kind of a change, and they're a pretty powerful and connected group in Olympia. So that hasn't gone anywhere, but that's certainly something that we would endorse and support. Because in the case of our district, our schools that are out close to Duval are not practical relief valves for our schools that are in North Bothell, South Mill Creek, without busing kids an inordinate amount of time on the Woodinville-Duval Road. That just doesn't make any sense.
I have one more question, and it has to do about your bonding cycle every 4 years. Mm-hmm. Has there any noticeable trend on your approval? Obviously, you have a good success track record. I'm just curious what the trend is, or is there a trend that is going one way or another?
Yeah, so it's there's a slight trend. So I would say that over the last perhaps 4 to 5 bond cycles, you've seen the yes percentage for all 3 of our measures decline slightly. And I would attribute a couple of things to that. One is fewer families with school-age children in the schools, so kind of the stake in the game. And then 2 would be the introduction of all-male elections. So when you go back to the days where people actually had to go somewhere to vote, or they had to register themselves as an absentee ballot, we probably tended to have a higher percentage of yes votes, more people motivated to vote yes perhaps than no. What we did notice in the last election cycle, 2010 was obviously a rough election cycle just because of the state of the economy at that time, and so that was sort of the low point in passing of levy and bond measures. Low point being, I think our bond passed at about 62% that year, needing 60% to get there. And then in this last cycle in 2014, we were back up to about 65% on our bond and closer to 70% on our operations levy, which is getting back to sort of historical highs or at least historical norms of the district. So,
on that same note, what time of year do you guys usually go out and why?
We go out in February. The reason being a couple. One is if we should go out in February and not pass, then we have the opportunity to run again in April.
Okay.
Second is we try and coordinate when we run our measures with our peer neighboring districts and when they run their measures, so that we can take advantage of sort of the collective awareness that these elections are taking place.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize, we probably went much longer than intended, and we're certainly interested in what the city of Kenmore has going on as well. Yeah, thank you.
So, upcoming city park and ball field improvements, including St. Edward ball fields. Mr. Carlinsey.
Thank you. So if this were a baseball game, I think we'd probably be in the 7th inning. So does anybody need a 7th inning stretch, or are we good?
we're good.
Okay. I don't know if Board Member Smith wants to stretch a little bit, or welcome, by the way. Thank you for coming. Okay. In Kenmore, we have a lot of exciting things going on, and I just love working for the city because it's never a dull moment, and there's a lot of transformational things going on that are really fun to be a part of. And got a good city council that's getting along well and working well as a team together. And What I'd like to do, first of all, and Patty, if you don't mind turning on the projector. If you could turn down those lights too, that'd be great. So just zooming out a little bit, we have the city of Kenmore, and I'm zooming into. We are the crown of Lake Washington. And one of the jewels in the crown is Bastyr University and also St. Edward State Park right there on Lake Washington. We have our eyes on a baseball facility, or sports field facility, I should say, right here in St. Edward State Park. So this is Bastyr University, if you can see my cursor, and then here is St. Edward State Park, over 300 acres. This is the seminary building that some of you may have been hearing about in the news. It made the front page of the Seattle Times a few weeks ago. So right here, just to the east, is a 3-acre sports facility. And it's an historic facility. The seminarians used to play on this field, and just as recently as about 6 or 7 years ago, this was actually 2 baseball diamonds, one here and one here. And about 6 years ago, it started to fall into neglect and disrepair and stopped being used to its fullest potential. And the city went to the State Parks Commission in 2008 and asked for permission to take it over. Long story short, the State Parks Commission did not grant that approval, but we're back again asking for approval for the city to take over and control this ball field. We're looking at, again, 2 baseball diamonds, and then also 2 soccer fields that would be right here. This right here, see this line, this scar, this is no accident. This is a cricket pitch. And so we would continue to maintain that as well. But we're in talks with State Parks for the city to take over and renovate this facility. We're hoping we could get control of it for a good 30 years. We're at the moment we're looking at synthetic turf and perhaps even lighting to get us more use into the fall and winter seasons. If we go with the synthetic turf, we're definitely going to avoid crumb rubber, if you've been reading about that in the news. And so we're looking at alternatives, organic alternatives such as coconut fibers, cork, and even just rounded silica sand. So we're going to be talking to the State Parks Commission on March 31st about this, not for their approval, but for them to give us their feedback, ask questions. From what I can tell, they seem open to this idea, and it's looking pretty favorable. Whether or not they would allow lighting, that's probably the toughest issue to address with them. We're going to be doing a SEPA analysis on it to look at parking impacts, traffic impacts, critical areas impacts, things like that. So if State Parks approves it, which might be later this year, then we have a couple of funding options. One is to include it in a bond issue or a ballot measure in the fall that I'll talk about later. Or the city could just find the funds through the authority that the city council has. So we're looking at a couple of funding options right now, which we haven't nailed down. So timing is unknown at this time because of the funding issue. If it goes in a ballot measure this fall, we could see construction probably in 2018.
Do you have a rough estimate, Rob, of what the renovation cost would be?
Yeah, if you include the full meal deal with the lighting and everything, we're looking about $3 million. About half that if you don't do the lighting and you just do natural turf, natural grass. So that's one baseball field we're looking at. And I know this is of interest to the school district because our recreation leagues do use your fields. My kids play on them frequently. And so this definitely has some impact on you. We're also, I'm going to now take you to a funded sports field that we received a state grant for and allocated city funds for. And it happens to be Morelands Park. Now, what's interesting about Morelands Park is it's city-owned. So I'm going to take this little cursor and I'm going to show you the city-owned area. If you can follow me here. That's the city-owned area of Morelands Park. And even though it's city-owned, it serves as much of the play area for Morelands Elementary during recess. So just the other day, a week or two ago, I came and I parked in this lot right here, and it happened to be during recess. And the kids were playing on the play structure right here, and they were all in the field and everything, and it was really great. But so I parked here, got out of my car, and immediately a recess monitor came up to me and said, what are you here for? And I said, oh, I'm just here to check out the park. I'm with the city. And she goes, well, you'll need to go to the office and get a pass. And I said, well, actually, I don't need to because this is city property. And she goes, no, I don't care. You need to go and get a pass. And so I just kind of quickly left after that. Anyway, the arrangement we have, if you didn't know, and so if you looked at an inventory of your elementary schools and the amount of acreage next to your elementary schools, you would see an anomaly next to Morelands because it'd be a tiny amount of acreage for a typical elementary school. Why? Because the city owns the play area. So the arrangement we have right now going through 2018 is that the school gets to use this in return for mowing and blowing it and keeping it maintained and keeping the play structure safe and things like that. Well, we have some significant improvements we're going to be adding to this park. We're going to be renovating the ball field, putting in trails, a play structure, a picnic shelter, restrooms, and these are going to be pretty nice upgrades. And we're going to need to talk about this arrangement that we have with the school district. And for example, the maintenance needs of this newly rented ball field. By the way, this is going to be about $1.5 to $1.6 million we'll be putting into this. And so the level of maintenance is going to go up significantly. The expectation and the quality of the maintenance is going to go up significantly. And I think you only have like a very small number of landscape maintenance workers for your entire school district. It's like 7 or something like that, some small number. So expecting them to significantly upgrade their maintenance of this field in relation to all the other sports fields they maintained is going to be an interesting question. So don't need to negotiate the terms or get into the details of what the arrangement's going to be looking like, but our point is it's probably going to need to change given the quality of the improvements we're going to be putting in this field. So more to come on that. Stay tuned. We're going to be approaching your staff in the near future to begin discussions on that. So we expect to actually, this project's under design right now, and we expect to get under construction in 2017. So within about a year or so of the lease expiration that we have with you is when the ball fields will be improved here. So,
Are you going to keep that all as natural turf, Rob?
Right now the funding assumes grass turf, yes.
Rob, are you guys looking at parking? Additional parking up in that area?
Good question. Thank you for asking that, because I learned the hard way on Thanksgiving Day. My son's soccer team decided to go have a little turkey bowl right here on Thanksgiving Day, and you know what, we weren't the only ones that had that idea that day. And so there were several turkey bowls going on, and see, this parking lot can only handle maybe a dozen cars. And this is the city's official parking lot for the park. It's really tiny. And so I drove in here, and I had to quickly get out of there because it was so crowded. And I said, oh, I'll just go park in the school parking lot. Wrong answer, because you guys have it gated off for security reasons, which makes sense. So if we upgrade these ball fields, we are going to need to look at better parking arrangements. Maybe some arrangement we can make with the schools. The Romanian church right here already has a drop-off arrangement with the school where parents can take their kids in, drop them off, and there's a gate right here. So we might need to engage the Romanian church and ask them for parking. And there's some other real estate options nearby that we might also want to explore. Really good question. We need to solve that parking issue. So that's all I have on sports fields. Next topic is Imagine Kenmore. And our city council has asked us to work with the community on a potential ballot measure. And we've kept it open as either a parks measure or a sidewalks measure or both. And so we've done a pretty aggressive campaign asking our citizens what they'd like to see, if anything, in the form of sidewalk and bicycle improvements or park improvements or both. So we've had a lot of community meetings, we've had online interactive mapping and surveys and statistically valid survey, and just done a lot of outreach to our citizens, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback. So our city council is taking all that feedback and narrowing it down to several options. One is a pedestrian bicycle only ballot measure that would look at putting sidewalks on several of our major arterials. One is a parks ballot measure that would look at some waterfront park improvements and perhaps maybe the St. Edward Seminary ball field might be in there. And then they're looking at a combination of parks and pedestrian improvements on a ballot measure that would take kind of the best from both and put them on one ballot measure. So the City Council is going to give us some feedback on the 14th of March, and based on that feedback, then we will take a hypothetical package and test it in a statistically valid survey. And then based on the results of that survey, we'll get direction from the City Council on where they want to go from there. But right now we're looking at a ballot measure most likely in November. And so it'll either be ped bike, parks, or a combination of the two. The size of the package is ranging between 15 and 20 million, just peanuts compared to what you all are used to. It would impact a household somewhere between $12 and $15 a month for a $400,000 home. Okay, downtown developments. Let's keep using these aerials because now I want to take you to a different part of the city. First, I want to take you to Lake Point, which is considered part of our downtown. And to give you some perspective, we are right here at City Hall. So if you cross 522, you have right here Lake Point. It's also known as Kenmore Industrial Park. And for several years now, the SR 520 bridge components have been constructed on this site. So the anchors and the bridge decking and things like that. Just right over here to the left is Kenmore Air Harbor, which is the largest seaplane harbor in the U.S. and one of the businesses that we're just really proud of. So Lake Point is 45 acres, and a lot of it is fill material. So 100 plus years ago, this peninsula didn't even really exist. And some of this peninsula is fill material from I-5 construction demolition from the 1950s and 60s. So some old homes and things like that were deconstructed and moved over here. So it's a challenging site because of the material that it's made of. But we do have, or we are in talks with a developer who has tied up the property. And the developer is Widener Apartment Homes. And they're a pretty large apartment landlord in the United States. They're the largest landlord in Arizona and Alaska, and they have a pretty big presence in some other states. They're headquartered in Kirkland, and they have a purchase and sale agreement on this property, and we are in talks with them on what a project might look like and what they could develop here. Transportation is going to be the #1 big issue. We already have so much congestion here right now, and so how this project ties into State Route 522 and into Juanita Drive, and how they mitigate for their transportation impacts is going to be one of the biggest issues that they'll have to deal with. They're looking at in the range of about 1,200 residential units. Some of them may be condos, but the developer we're working with, his specialty is apartments. So that's something that the school district might definitely be interested in. Larry and I have already been talking about this for quite some time, so it's definitely on his radar. In addition to the 1,200 residential units, we'll also see about 500,000 square feet of commercial, combination of office and retail. Might even see a hotel. So this is still years away. Just figuring this all out and working with WashDOT on the transportation issue and going through the permitting, it's still years away. Back in 2013, though, we did set a man-on-the-moon goal. We said in kind of like JFK, by the end of the decade, we said in 10 years, so in 2023, we want this to be going vertical, meaning they're building upward. And so, with a developer that's kicking the tire, more than kicking the tires on this, they are spending some good money on this. 2023 seems like it's reachable as far as getting this project off the ground. This project, more than any other, in my opinion, has the ability to transform Kenmore and really get rid of some blight and bring more energy and activity to our downtown.
Rob, is that all under a single ownership right now, all 45 acres?
Yes, that's one of the beauties of this project. The cement plant, however, and asphalt plant, which are right here, correct? Yeah. They are under different ownership. So, but you can see this is where the barges come in to deliver concrete to the concrete plant, but they also come here to Lake Point to help with the 520 bridge project.
Those rectangular things that you see there are actually the road deck surface before they've been barged out to be put on the pontoons.
Yeah.
So 2 of those make one section of roadway.
Okay, now let me take you to what I call the bullseye. And this is the area that the city councils over the years in our downtown plan have identified as where we really want our main to be, our downtown core, so to speak. And so about 10 years ago, the city acquired 10 acres, which is right here. They assembled it piece by piece, and over recent years, we've been selling it off piece by piece to developers with strings attached. So we've said you can only build if you do what we want you to do and do what's best in growing our own downtown sense of place. So Main Street Property Group purchased, oh, this is a new aerial photo, isn't it?
Yeah.
My goodness. Okay. Well, this used to be a blank piece of property here. It was a former King County Park and Ride once upon a time. But Main Street Property Group, which is also developing a lot of property in Bothell and Kirkland and Redmond, they purchased this 4.5-acre piece, and they've been building apartment units here. And this is phase 1, this is phase 2. Between the two phases, they'll have about 250 units. And they expect to have those units fully built and filled in the next year or so. They're seeing good rental income and pretty rapid saturation rates. They're not having to offer special deals or anything. So they're really pleased with how quickly they've been able to rent it. Kenmore Camera purchased 1.25 acres from us in 2013, and that's this piece. It allowed them to triple their square footage and stay in Kenmore. And so they put quite a bit of money into this building, and it's a beautiful building if you ever have been there. They're kind of a regional draw and one of our anchors for our downtown. This is the city-owned post office, so we lease this to the post office. Just recently, the city sold this acreage right here to Main Street Property Group as well, and they're putting in a 6-story building. First floor is parking. Second floor is 20,000 square foot medical office facility for Evergreen Health. And Dr. Curtis is one of the higher ups, if I might say, at Evergreen Health, and so he's been a good advocate for us and helping us with that project. We decided to keep the corner in this frontage along 181st. We're going to build a town green here, and it's under construction right now. If you notice when you're coming in here, they'll include a community building and a year-round gathering space, and we hope to have that done in fall of this year. We also have a restaurant pad reserved here for when the town green's done, and Main Street can purchase that pad when they have produced a lease with a sit-down restaurant. So the pieces of our downtown are coming together over time. It's not an overnight thing by any means, but all the pieces, or many of the pieces, seem to be coming into place gradually. Not just Kenmore Village, what I just described, but also the City Hall and the City Hall Park and the new library over here. And we're starting to see a bit of a ripple effect. A developer just purchased these 2 properties back here, and we think it's because we're telling a good story. And so we're excited to see Kenmore start to get its own downtown and its own walkable downtown. Not these ones here, but this is going to have office space in this apartment complex. They also have plans to build a commercial building right here. They have not secured a tenant yet, but this commercial building might include some sort of retail. So Kenmore, as you know, incorporated in 1998. It was a suburb of the Seattle area, unincorporated King County. And so one of the first things the city wanted to do when it incorporated was to create its own downtown and stop being a pass-through city, a bedroom community only. And so we are making strides towards having a downtown sense of place. Okay, on to another topic, and that's Sound Transit 3. This is a really big deal for us. So Bothell Way is a congested highway, and I believe that it will always be congested, and the congestion problem is bigger than Kenmore. The congestion has a lot to do with what's going on regionally and how state highway facilities are operating, whether it's I-5 or I-405. And so given what we know about Bothell Way and how it will always be congested, we think the name of the game from this point on is alternative forms of transportation. And we definitely want to be a project in the Sound Transit 3 package that is going to the voters in November. And in particular, we are advocating heavily for bus rapid transit on the 522 corridor from I-405 roughly all the way through Bothell, Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, and then up the 523, which is 145th, to the future light rail station at 145th and I-5, which is scheduled to be delivered in 2023. We think that there's going to be 7,000 plus people descending on this light rail station in 2023 when it opens, and it only has a 500 car parking garage associated with it. So we think we have a role to play in getting people to that station, and we think bus rapid transit on the 522 corridor is going to be key in getting people to that light rail station. So that's one of our main arguments. Bus rapid transit, what is it? The way it was best explained to me is it mimics a train as much as possible without being a train. So it's a bus that is very much like a train. So short headways, meaning buses come frequently, and less stopping points, and even the infrastructure feels like more like a train. They have platforms you get on and things like that. So bus rapid transit isn't cheap, but of all the Sound Transit 3 projects that are being proposed right now, it's one of the less expensive ones, and it's one of the best buys for your money given cost per rider if you look at other projects being proposed. So we're looking pretty good on that. Politically, I think we're getting really good signals from Sound Transit board members, including the chair of the board, and a lot of the thanks for that goes to Mayor Baker and his contact with Dow Constantine. And we have a good 5-city coalition of cities advocating unitedly for this project, from Woodinville all the way to Shoreline. And we had a city council meeting back in June where we had 4 of the 5 cities present and the mayor of one of them present. And it was a pretty cool meeting, and we had Sound Transit board members there, and it really sent a clear message that we're serious about this, and this is really important to our region. Also in this package that we're proposing parking garages, and right now tentatively Sound Transit staff have 3 300-car parking garages proposed to go along with bus rapid transit. 1 in Bothell, 1 in Kenmore, and 1 in Lake Forest Park. They haven't identified exactly where those would be. Also, we're advocating that as part of Sound Transit 3, that a light rail study be conducted for the corridor. And so, don't know if anybody here will still be alive, but that could possibly set the stage for light rail in Sound Transit 4. So, yeah. We think so. Right now we have what we call BAT lanes, which are business access transit lanes. So they're bus-only lanes unless you're in a car and you're going to turn into the businesses there. And so it's likely that those will be utilized for the bus rapid transit. Sound Transit isn't super keen on sharing their BRT lanes with anybody at all, and so we will have to work that out, but we think that's not a deal killer or anything. So.
Rob, when you may have said it, when will Sound Transit be finalizing the package?
Yeah, so the board is going to be looking at a draft package on March 24th, so that's coming soon. And then the board will be reviewing it, and they'll be finalizing and giving final adoption to the package in June. and then it'll go on the ballot in November of this year.
So you don't have any definitive information yet on what's going to be in the draft package, other than
No.
good signals?
We're getting good signals, yep.
Very strong signals.
And that's all I have.
Any questions? Councilmember Sperry. Oh, go ahead.
So the fact that you're building community parks, I think, is helpful. There's not enough place to put our community, soccer teams and fields. I mean, soccer team and baseball team, so.
Sure.
I was excited to hear that. I think that'll.
Great. Yeah, and Kenmore in particular is what I call sports fields poor. For a city its size, it doesn't have its own sports fields. And so our citizens have to go to other cities and do a lot of driving just to have their kids do sports. So.
And I think our involvement with families and kids in the Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, and I think Kaboom, a national organization, Playful Cities, it's just natural that we continue to try to add outdoor play and athletic facilities for the kids. Just makes for a healthier community, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and if you happen to run into a Washington State Parks Commissioner, feel free to put in a good word.
That's right.
Because they're the ones that are making the decision on the St. Edward fields. So.
And so what is your role with the St. Edward's proposal and how that's moving down or not moving down the road?
You're talking about the ball fields or the seminary building?
the
Seminary building.
Yeah, at this point it is a Washington State Parks Commission decision. If the State Parks Commission approves it going forward, then it would come to the city for a land use decision.
Anything else? Any other questions? Yeah, Lori.
I don't know if you saw the former school board member, Janet Quinn. Yeah, and so the reason she was here is she's co-leading the Citizen Coalition for the 522 Transit Now. So a lot of what the good signals is due in large part to the leadership of this citizen group along with electeds and.
Yeah, thank you. So I saw a really sad email today. Did anybody else see that email?
About 4 times.
Yeah.
Good news travels fast, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that one, yes. Tried to forget it.
Yeah, big loss to the district with your superintendent leaving. I've been the city manager of Kenmore since April 2012, and he was really great meeting with me when I first became the city manager, and he's just been so great to work with and a true professional. So good luck to you, Larry. It's been great.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that, and thank all of you. It's a bittersweet opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless, so thank you. And just as a point of process, so the North Shore Board is meeting in a special meeting at 1:30 tomorrow, and they'll begin their process of discussing how they wish to proceed. They've got a number of options, I think, to chew over. And
Tough shoes to fill.
And I'm here through June 30th, so don't start going around me or through me or by me yet. So.
Yeah, I saw. Sorry, this is just so crazy. So I saw the name of the district, but or the number, I think it was. I don't have any idea where that is or what.
Yeah, so it's Educational Service District 189. So there are 295 school districts in Washington State. In those 295 are organized into 9 what are called educational service districts, and so they're school districts of a different sort. They're school districts of school districts. And so they have some regulatory functions from the state. They're sort of an arm of this OSPI and the State Board of Education, but their primary service is to provide, or their primary mission is to provide services to school districts that it doesn't make sense for school districts to provide for themselves. So they get very little state funding, so most of what they do is through cooperative programs or fee-based programs where school districts will pay them to do things that it makes sense for the educational service district to do rather than the school district. They're grant recipients, mental health type grants, professional development type grants, Gates monies, those kinds of things. So they're entrepreneurial, and they primarily exist to provide services to, in this case, the 35 school districts from Snohomish County up to the Canadian border. So, yeah, real different kind of challenge and opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. Lots to learn.
So the district, North Shore School District is not in that then?
No, we're actually in the Puget Sound school district because most of our territory is in King County, so we fall into our official designation is a King County school district.
That's fascinating. I had no idea there were even such a thing. So,
Yeah, they're a little off the beaten path, but, very much a part of my world, for sure.
Councilmember Smith.
I just wanted to thank you for hearing the input from the council when you came out on your realignment and reconfiguration of the schools and everything. I know that you're hearing a lot of stuff and none of it's ever positive, and so you have to try to figure out how do you take the best of a lot of negative things and create something positive out of it. But I appreciate the fact that you at least listened to what we had to offer and revisions were made, and that means something.
Yeah,
so thank you.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the way you came forward to express your concerns, and I think some of you spent some time, Mayor Baker and
Councilmember Danuski.
Danuski, and I think, was there one other? But came over and actually met in our office with folks there and actually looked at maps to make sure we were really clear on what we were talking about, and that's the way it should work.
Councilmember Curtis.
I would just like to say that I really found this informative to hear what you guys do and the policy level decisions you make and how you interact with state requirements that are passed and might be passed or in the process of being passed. And it's hard to believe you have any time to actually educate any kids. You have this huge body of work to be done. So it was just, like I say, great education for me. Thank you.
Danuski.
I wanted to thank you guys all for coming tonight, and just you guys have done an excellent job with community input and getting the word out and just communication on the high school, the grade reconfiguration, the Start School Later campaign, and the communication's been really good, so thanks.
Thank you.
Ryan, 13. Ryan and Karen.
Yeah, they've worked, our support services department has worked especially hard these last, I have to say, 3-4 years, even before
for any of us,
before the bond came into being, coming up with the idea of grade reconfiguration as a way of creatively working on our enrollment growth, as well as providing some curriculum benefits as well. It's really a testament to the fact, like Larry said, there was only 2 people who came to speak at the final meeting. It really exemplifies what happened with the whole process. And I'd like to, in turn, say thank you also, when we were mingling a bit before the meeting, and the school district was complimented on how it helps attract families to the area. I'd like to say that likewise, all the work that we've seen in the city of Kenmore, all the planning, the thoughtful work with the library, it's really very apparent, and I think it complements as well, what we're trying to do as a school district, really strengthen and build the area in a very positive direction with the growth that we know is coming. I'd like to thank you all for this too. It's been fascinating.
In years past, we've had joint meetings. It's been with Woodinville and Bothell and us, but us the two of us getting together, I think, is really beneficial. And I would really like to see this become a yearly thing to where we can sit down and just tell each other what we're doing. I think it just makes us more aware of what's going on around us. So I hope we can do this again next year. So.
Well, I think we should do it on February 29th every year.
We're
How about
also
the
going
second Tuesday of next week? I think it would be particularly advantageous when the new superintendent has been in for a little bit, kind of settled down and whatever. It might be good if we all got back together.
That might be the next February 29th.
When they're settled down.
Yes.
Mayor Baker, I wanted to invite you and the Kenmore City Council to consider attending the North Shore Schools Foundation Luncheon. It's an annual fundraiser they held at the Linwood Community Center. It's going to be April 6th. And so it's a fundraiser, and the benefits of the fundraiser benefit the students of North Shore schools. So if anybody has an opening on their schedule on Wednesday, would like to attend, I'll leave this information.
Not this Wednesday.
Wednesday, April 6th.
And as a little added benefit, there is an award that the Schools Foundation gives to an outstanding educator, and it's Moreland's elementary teacher who's being honored this year. And some of her past students are going to come and speak to her contribution. So in case you do have 90 minutes to lend, it's a great event. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. A little bit more city stuff got to get done.
That's it, Your
Staff
Honor.
report.
That's it.
That's it. Council members. Councilmember Danuski, anything?
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Herbig?
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Curtis?
Nothing to add?
Councilmember Sperry?
Nothing at this time?
Councilmember Smith? Deputy Mayor?
Mayor Baker and I are leaving Wednesday morning.
Thank you.
You want me to do that?
No, I want you to do it. That's right. I always have too much to say at the end,
Yeah.
so you please go
Going
ahead.
back to the NLC meeting, National League of Cities meeting in Washington, D.C., and we'll be meeting with our representatives, our two senators, and Susan Delbene, our congresswoman, and talking about our needs here in the Kenmore area. We'll be doing that Thursday and Friday of this week, and then the actual National League of Cities meeting goes Sunday through Wednesday, Saturday through Wednesday. And so it's always a good meeting to meet people from around the country and also to visit our legislators back there in D.C. So looking forward to a productive meeting.
Yeah, it is always a great opportunity to meet with our delegation back in D.C. There's a White House visit again. This one is on Wednesday, so I will probably be attending that. This week, met with the Speaker. Ongoing. So we're moving forward on St. Ed slowly but surely. But in any event, don't forget, next regular council meeting is the 14th of March. And so that we have nothing on the 5th, I think it is. Councilmember Smith? I am done.
I'm only going to add this for your benefit, actually. My council knows this, but effective probably tomorrow, and I say probably because there's still some fine-tuning to go on, but the North Shore Senior Center is changing, and its boundaries, I should back up and say, it's run by the North Shore Park Service Recreation Area, and it's the same boundary as the North Shore School District. Well, it is no longer going to be run through senior services, and they are going to be independently run, and they're forming their own operating agreements right now and employment and everything. So it's something that, since you all live spread out throughout the district, you will probably hear about this, but they'll be going through some significant probably growing pains over the next few months, and it's right in the middle of making the transition right now. So I just wanted to let you know that.
I actually have a question related to that. So it's my understanding the Park and Rec service area has the ability to do various things, but the only thing it has done has been the North Shore Senior Center. One of the regional questions that exists is the availability of public swimming pools. And Kirkland had tried to send one out to bond, and that had not succeeded. The district currently uses the swimming pool at Juanita for our high school competitive swim. Has there, my understanding is the board of the recreation area is a city councilman from these places, county, and et cetera.
Yeah, I can tell you how it's made up. It's a representative from Woodinville, Kenmore. I'm the Kenmore representative. 2 council members from Bothell, and then from the county council in Snohomish County and King County. And basically, the only thing that we pay for on our taxes right now as a taxing district is we own the 2 buildings there at the senior center. It's the 2 that are connected by the bridge, pedestrian bridge. So those 2 structures are 20-some years old. There's a lot of challenges too on the maintenance of those, but to the best of my knowledge, I've heard nothing recently about anybody that is proposing bringing a pool bond forward. I know it was explored about 10 years ago. I know Bill Evans was very much involved in that process, and he just retired from the Bothell City Council. And I think probably more than anything, one of the things that really hurt that was there didn't appear to be enough really strong groundswell of support. And then the economy, when it really went south, that was right as this was, they had finally completed some studies, and I believe back then it was about a $20 million project, so you can imagine what that would cost today, and that would be consistent with Kirkland's price, because their price tag was well north of that. So to answer your question, Ken, I don't know anything that's on the horizon as far as anybody looking at that, and I can tell you right now we're really focused on making sure that we get the senior center up and running, and that their contracts and everything we have to work with them on make sense, and that they're self-sufficient. And so unless there's anything else you wanted to add or another question on that.
Yeah, the question is, and I before looked like for the minutes and the other things and it hadn't been able to find that much. So is it the movement to the new organizational structure is essentially what?
So Senior Services was an organization. They're based out of, they're in King County, based in Seattle, and they were operating the senior center. All the funding the fundraising and the dollars they would raise, even when they rent their facilities, they'd go to Senior Services, and then Senior Services in turn would give them money back. It was almost like a federal government model. It seemed like, you tax us, we send our money to DC, and then they send you something back. That's kind of what it seemed analogous to me as, well, this was their largest senior center that they operated, and they continually, it appeared, wanted to squeeze more and more out of them. And it got to a point where it was very difficult, even from their fundraising side, to raise funds, because it would go to Senior Services. And there was a number of other issues too, and so when they changed the contract significantly at the end of last year, they basically said either do it our way or discontinue, and it was time to break away. The mayor may be able to add some things. I know he's been involved at some level locally with the senior center, but I would say that it was time for them to have a little more control, and their board feels they can do it, and so we're responsible for the maintenance of the capital facilities. as the taxing district. So we need to know that they're maintained correctly, and then they have an operating agreement with us for those facilities. Does that make sense?
Almost. So,
Okay.
so the service area just pays the bond for the building, and then whatever operations are run is run by some outsourced management company or group, and and that operating management group is the group that's changing. And then the money that's used to pay for the building, the bond, that comes through tax dollars. So it's basically it's collected and paid.
That's
and
right.
so then if operations are done, it's by whoever the service area contracts with to do the operations.
Yes, and they'll be self-managed now. And so it's a pretty significant savings, but they'll also have significant, as you can imagine, additional costs. So there is some risk in all of this. And so it's important that everybody's aware, because we all sort of have a vested interest in seeing them succeed and keep their feet on the ground.
Yeah, we contribute heavily to this Kenmore Senior Center, which in turn gives some of that money back over to North Shore, that went back to the senior services, and so
it's very
we want to keep more of it here.
It's confusing because senior services, they just changed their name and they sound a lot like the North Shore Senior Center. And so when you're reading some of this, you have to make sure you're really paying attention to what the name is, because a lot of the names seem interchangeable and they're not.
Thank you.
And I think senior services is a creature of King County. So, anything else? With that, we are adjourned.